Breaking. Over 300 drones descended on Kyiv last night in what military analysts are calling the most sophisticated and deadly aerial assault in modern warfare history. And what unfolded in the skies above Ukraine's capital has changed everything we thought we knew about drone warfare and civilian targeting. Before we go further, hit that subscribe button right now. We're covering this developing crisis with minute-by-minute updates as the situation in Kyiv continues to unfold. It started at 11:47 p.m. local time on April 12, 2025. Air raid sirens pierced the night across Kyiv. Nothing unusual. The city has lived with these warnings for 3 years now. Residents have learned the routine, head to shelters, wait it out, return to life. But this time was different. Ukrainian air defense operators watching their radar screens saw something that made their blood run cold. Not 10 drones, not 50, 314 individual targets incoming from multiple vectors simultaneously. The largest drone swarm attack ever recorded in human history was bearing down on a city of 3 million people. Military communications intercepted in the first minutes reveal the shock. Command, we have multiple bogeys. I repeat, multiple. Too many to count. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. The drones came in waves. The first wave hit at midnight. Shahed 136 drones, Iranian-designed kamikaze units loaded with high explosives. They targeted power infrastructure on the city's outskirts. Transformer stations erupted in flames that lit up the night sky. The second wave arrived 17 minutes later. These weren't targeting infrastructure. They were heading straight for residential neighborhoods in central Kyiv. Air defense systems that had protected the capital for years suddenly faced an impossible mathematical problem. You can't intercept 300 targets when you have ammunition for maybe 100. Operators had to make choices no one should ever make. Which neighborhoods to protect? Which incoming drones to engage? Which to let through because there simply weren't enough missiles? The explosion started at 12:34 a.m., and they didn't stop for 4 hours and 23 minutes. Imagine being a resident of Kyiv that night. You're in your apartment, maybe sleeping, maybe watching late-night television. The sirens sound. You've heard them 1,000 times before. Then you hear the first explosion. Closer than usual. Your windows rattle. Car alarms start shrieking across the neighborhood. Another explosion. Closer still. Now you feel it in your chest. The building shakes. Debris starts falling past your window. You grab your children, your elderly parents, your pets. You run for the shelter. And as you descend the stairs, you hear them, dozens of explosions, block after block, the sound of your city being destroyed in real time. This was the reality for hundreds of thousands of Kyiv residents last night. The Pechersk district, home to government buildings and residential high-rises, took direct hits. A drone struck a 12-story apartment building at 1:15 a.m. The explosion tore through 6 floors. Families sleeping in their beds never had a chance to react. Emergency services arrived within minutes. But more drones were still incoming. Firefighters had to work while explosions continued around them. Rescuers pulled survivors from rubble while air defense systems fired overhead and debris rained down from intercepted drones. The Shevchenkivsky district saw a drone strike a children's hospital at 2:03 a.m., the pediatric wing, where sick children were sleeping under care of night shift nurses. The building's eastern wall collapsed. 3 floors pancaked onto each other. Rescue crews worked through the night, pulling small bodies from the wreckage. Some alive, too many not. By 3 a.m., every hospital in Kyiv was overwhelmed. Emergency rooms designed for dozens of patients were treating hundreds. Doctors performed triage in parking lots. The injured kept arriving faster than medical staff could treat them. Dawn broke over Kyiv at 6:47 a.m. on April 13th, and the full scale of the devastation became visible. 314 drones launched. Ukrainian air defenses managed to intercept 207. That's a 66% intercept rate. Under normal circumstances, that would be considered exceptional performance. But 107 drones got through. and each one carried enough explosives to destroy a building. The preliminary casualty count is staggering: 83 confirmed dead as of this broadcast. That number is expected to rise significantly as rescue operations continue. Over 400 injured. Dozens still missing under collapsed structures. 17 residential buildings suffered major structural damage. 5 are complete losses that will have to be demolished. The Children's Hospital is a total loss. A maternity ward took a direct hit. A school that mercifully was empty due to the overnight timing. The power infrastructure damage is catastrophic. 40% of Kyiv is without electricity. Water treatment facilities are offline in 3 districts. Communications infrastructure took hits that disrupted mobile networks and internet service. The economic cost is being calculated, but early estimates suggest over $2 billion in direct damage. That's not counting the indirect economic impact of disrupted business, destroyed infrastructure, and the psychological toll on a population already traumatized by 3 years of war. Ukrainian military sources are providing details about what happened inside air defense command centers during the attack. The sophisticated nature of this assault cannot be overstated. The drones didn't just come from one direction. They approached from 7 different vectors, forcing Ukrainian defenses to split their coverage and dilute their effectiveness. They flew at varying altitudes, some high, some at treetop level, making radar tracking and interception far more difficult than standard attacks. They used timing coordination that suggests advanced command and control systems. Waves arriving in precise intervals designed to overwhelm defenses faster than systems could reload and re-engage. Some drones served as decoys, cheap units designed to draw fire and deplete ammunition so the real strike drones could get through. Ukrainian operators had to make split-second decisions about which targets were real threats. Electronic warfare played a role. Some drones carried jamming equipment that disrupted Ukrainian communications and targeting systems. Others used GPS spoofing to confuse air defense radars about their actual positions and trajectories. Military analysts examining the attack patterns are describing this as a graduate-level lesson in drone swarm tactics. Everything learned from 3 years of warfare combined into a single, overwhelmingly complex assault designed to saturate defenses beyond their capacity to respond. One Ukrainian air defense commander, speaking on condition of anonymity, put it bluntly, "We did everything right. We intercepted 2/3 of them, and it still wasn't enough." That's the terrifying new reality of drone warfare. News of the attack spread globally within minutes. By dawn in Kyiv, it was headline news across every continent. The White House issued a statement at 2 a.m. Washington time. Strong condemnation of the attack on civilian targets. Reaffirmation of American support for Ukraine. Announcements of emergency military aid shipments, including advanced air defense systems. NATO held emergency consultations at 4 a.m. Brussels time. All 32 member states represented in a virtual meeting that lasted 3 hours. The message was unified. Attacks on this scale against civilian populations represent escalation that cannot go unanswered. The European Union called an emergency session of foreign ministers, discussions of additional sanctions packages, debates about providing more advanced defensive weapon systems, arguments about whether the current level of support is sufficient given the escalating nature of attacks. The United Nations Security Council scheduled an emergency meeting for later today, though everyone knows how that will go. Passionate speeches, competing narratives, a veto that prevents any meaningful resolution, the usual diplomatic theater while people in Kyiv dig through rubble looking for survivors. International aid organizations are mobilizing. The Red Cross is sending emergency medical teams. Doctors Without Borders is deploying surgical units. The World Food Program is coordinating emergency supplies for displaced residents. But humanitarian aid doesn't stop drone attacks. Medical teams can't shoot down incoming swarms. And everyone involved knows that condemnation and aid, while necessary, don't change the fundamental calculus of this war. Let's talk about what actually happened from a technical standpoint. Because understanding this attack means understanding where drone warfare is heading. The Shahed 136 drones used in this assault cost approximately $20,000 each. They're essentially flying bombs. Simple design, propeller engine, GPS guidance, explosive payload. Nothing particularly sophisticated about any individual unit. But 300 of them launched in coordinated waves? That's $6 million in drones. Compare that to the cost of air defense missiles used to intercept them. Each missile costs anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000, depending on the system. The math is brutal. Defenders spend $50 million in ammunition to stop $6 million in drones. And even with a 66% intercept rate, enough get through to cause catastrophic damage. This is the economic asymmetry that's reshaping modern warfare. The attacker can afford to lose 2/3 of their drones if the remaining third achieves strategic objectives. The defender bankrupts themselves trying to stop every single one. The coordination technology is what makes swarm attacks possible. Command and control systems that can launch, navigate, and target hundreds of autonomous units simultaneously. This requires sophisticated software, satellite navigation, and real-time adjustments based on defensive responses. Some of the drones captured intact show evidence of AI-assisted navigation, systems that can recognize and avoid obstacles, technology that allows them to operate even if GPS is jammed or spoofed, capabilities that make interception far more difficult than earlier generation drones. The electronic warfare component is equally concerning. Drones equipped with jamming technology, units designed specifically to confuse and disrupt air defense radars, decoy drones that look identical to real threats on radar but carry no explosives, existing only to waste defensive ammunition. This is industrialized drone warfare. And last night's attack on Kyiv demonstrated that the technology has evolved to a point where traditional air defenses are becoming obsolete. Behind the statistics and military analysis are human stories that need to be told. Olena Kovalenko was sleeping in her apartment in the Pechursk district when the first explosion hit her building. She grabbed her 7-year-old daughter Anna and ran for the stairwell. The building was shaking. Lights were out. People were screaming in the darkness. They made it to the shelter. Barely. The second explosion hit just as they reached the basement. The entrance they'd just come through collapsed. If they'd been 30 seconds slower, they'd be buried under tons of concrete right now. Olena and Anna spent 4 hours in that shelter, in darkness, with dozens of neighbors, listening to explosions, feeling the building shake with each impact, not knowing if their home was still standing, not knowing if they'd survive until morning. They emerged at dawn to find their apartment building severely damaged. The entire eastern side collapsed. Their apartment was on the western side, still standing, barely, but structurally unsafe. They can't go home. They're refugees in their own city now. Dr. Mikhail Petrov was on duty at the Children's Hospital when the drone struck at 2:03 a.m. He was in the pediatric intensive care unit, 8 children under his care, most on ventilators, all critically ill. The explosion threw him across the room. When he regained consciousness, the ceiling was partially collapsed. Electrical systems were down. The ventilators had stopped. Dr. Petrov and 2 nurses manually ventilated those 8 children for 45 minutes until backup power was restored. Squeezing bags, counting breaths, doing the work machines normally do. In the dark, while the building burned around them. While more explosions shook the structure, all 8 children survived. Because Dr. Petrov and his team refused to abandon them, because they did their jobs even when it meant staying in a collapsing building under active attack. Irina Marchenko lost her husband Dmitry last night. He was a first responder, a firefighter who'd served Kyiv for 18 years. When the explosion started, he reported to his station. He went out with his crew to fight fires and rescue trapped residents. A drone struck the building. They were evacuating at 2:47 a.m. The explosion brought down the facade. Dmitry was killed instantly along with 2 other firefighters. They died saving others. They died doing their duty. They died because someone decided that targeting a civilian city with 300 drones was acceptable warfare. This attack isn't happening in a vacuum. It comes at a specific moment in the war and carries specific strategic implications. Ukrainian forces have been making significant gains in recent weeks. Advances in 3 separate sectors: liberation of occupied territories, destruction of key military installations. The momentum has shifted noticeably. This attack on Kyiv appears designed to change that momentum, to inflict civilian casualties that create pressure on Ukrainian leadership to negotiate, to demonstrate capability to strike anywhere in Ukraine at any time, to terrorize the population into demanding an end to the war on any terms. It's also sending messages to Ukraine's international partners, demonstrating that continued support means continued escalation, that there's no military solution that doesn't involve unacceptable civilian costs, that the price of Ukrainian victory might be too high for Western public opinion to sustain. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the nation at 8 a.m. Kyiv time this morning, standing in front of a damaged apartment building, surrounded by rescue workers and survivors. His message was defiant. They believe they can break our spirit by killing our children. They believe they can terrorize us into surrender by destroying our homes. They are wrong. Every attack makes us stronger. Every crime makes our resolve firmer. Every victim makes our cause more just. The address was broadcast live across Ukrainian media and streamed globally. Within hours, it had millions of views. The image of Zelensky standing in front of smoking ruins, speaking directly to his traumatized nation, became instantly iconic. But behind the defiant rhetoric are difficult political realities. Ukraine's air defenses, while effective, are being depleted by attacks like this. Ammunition stockpiles are being consumed faster than they can be replenished. The country needs more advanced systems and needs them immediately. That requires continued international support, which requires maintaining Western public and political will, which becomes harder with each month of war and each billion in aid. The attack on Kyiv is designed to accelerate war weariness in capitals from Washington to Berlin. The question everyone is asking now: what comes next? Military strategists identify several possible trajectories, none of them reassuring. First possibility: this was a maximum effort demonstration, a show of capability designed to achieve political objectives without being repeatable in the near term. If true, Ukraine has time to reinforce defenses before the next major attack. Second possibility: this represents a new baseline. Attacks of this scale and sophistication become regular occurrences. Ukrainian air defenses face ongoing saturation attacks that gradually overwhelm capacity and allow increasing numbers of strikes through. Third possibility: this is the beginning of an escalatory cycle. Each side responds to the other's actions with increasingly severe measures. The conflict spirals toward total war with no clear endpoint and no possibility of negotiated resolution. The response from Ukrainian forces will be carefully calculated. Too limited, and it appears weak. Too aggressive, and it risks uncontrolled escalation. The balance between deterrence and restraint is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. International partners face similar calculations. More defensive aid seems obvious and necessary. But some weapon systems come with restrictions on use inside certain territories. Others require training that takes months. The timeline between need and capability creates dangerous windows of vulnerability. There's also the nuclear dimension that nobody wants to discuss publicly, but everyone is thinking about privately. 3 years of war without nuclear use has created a sense that the taboo is holding. But attacks like last night's raid on Kyiv test that assumption. They create pressures and fears that make previously unthinkable options seem almost rational in the fog of war. The international intelligence community is on highest alert monitoring for any indicators of preparation for unconventional weapons use. So far, those indicators remain normal. But the fact that we're even looking for them shows how far down the escalation ladder we've descended. Return to those apartment buildings in Kyiv, the ones that are still standing but structurally damaged. Families have been evacuated, possessions left behind, lives interrupted in the space of a few hours. Where do they go? Kyiv is already housing tens of thousands of internally displaced people from occupied territories. The infrastructure for supporting refugees is strained beyond capacity. Emergency shelters are overflowing. Host families are overwhelmed. The social services system is collapsing under the weight of accumulated crisis. Children who survived last night's attack will carry psychological scars for the rest of their lives. The sound of explosions, the fear in their parents' faces, the hours spent in dark shelters not knowing if they would survive until morning. These are traumas that don't heal quickly or easily. Schools across Kyiv will be dealing with traumatized students for weeks and months. Teachers will need to provide not just education, but psychological support, helping children process what they experienced, helping them feel safe in a city where safety is increasingly impossible to guarantee. The medical system will be treating victims of last night's attack for years, not just the immediate injuries, but the long-term consequences, permanent disabilities from blast injuries, chronic conditions from trauma, psychological disorders from sustained exposure to violence. The economic impact on individual families is devastating. Lost homes, lost possessions, lost livelihoods when businesses were destroyed, insurance systems that can't possibly cover losses on this scale, people who had modest but stable lives now facing poverty and displacement. And this is just one attack, one night in a war that's been going on for 3 years. Multiply these human costs by hundreds of attacks across dozens of cities, and the cumulative toll becomes almost incomprehensible. Ukraine's partners are scrambling to develop responses to the drone swarm threat demonstrated last night. Advanced air defense systems are being rushed into production, technologies specifically designed to counter large numbers of small targets. Directed energy weapons that can engage multiple drones sequentially without reloading, electronic warfare systems that can jam or spoof drone navigation. Counter-drone drones are being developed and deployed, units designed specifically to intercept and destroy attacking drones before they reach their targets. The concept is using cheap defenders to counter cheap attackers, neutralizing the economic asymmetry. Artificial intelligence is being integrated into defensive systems, machine learning algorithms that can identify and prioritize threats faster than human operators, automated engagement systems that remove humans from the decision loop when time is measured in fractions of seconds. But every defensive innovation prompts offensive evolution. As soon as new countermeasures are deployed, adversaries adapt their tactics. Add more drones to swarms, develop better electronic countermeasures. Use different approach angles and timing patterns. It's an arms race conducted in software and hardware simultaneously, and the pace of innovation is accelerating. Technologies that were theoretical 6 months ago are being deployed on battlefields today. Tactics that worked last month are obsolete this month. The winner of this technological competition isn't determined by who has better engineers or bigger budgets. It's determined by who can iterate faster, who can learn from failures and adapt more quickly, who can get new systems from concept to deployment before the enemy develops countermeasures. Last night's attack on Kyiv represents the current state-of-the-art in drone warfare. But it won't remain cutting edge for long. Both sides are already working on the next generation of systems. The attack we saw last night will be surpassed by something more sophisticated within months. The sun is setting over Kyiv as I record this, 20 hours since the attack began. The city is still reeling, still counting casualties, still pulling bodies from rubble. But Kyiv isn't surrendering, isn't collapsing, isn't giving up. Cafes that were damaged are already beginning repairs. Business owners are sweeping debris and replacing shattered windows. The metro system that shut down during the attack has partially reopened. People are returning to work. Life continues because it must. Because surrender isn't an option. Because 3 years of war have taught this city and this nation that survival requires resilience beyond what seems humanly possible. The children who survived last night will go back to school. The doctors who saved lives during the attack will return to their hospitals. The firefighters who lost comrades will continue responding to emergencies. Because that's what it means to be Ukrainian in 2025. But make no mistake, last night changed something fundamental. The scale of civilian targeting, the sophistication of the attack, the sheer number of drones involved. This represents an escalation that crosses lines that should never be crossed. 314 drones, 83 dead, hundreds injured, thousands displaced, a city traumatized, a nation tested, and a world forced to confront what modern warfare looks like when the constraints of human decency are abandoned. This attack will be studied in military academies for decades. The tactics will be analyzed. The technology will be dissected. The strategic implications will be debated by scholars who have the luxury of studying war from comfortable distances. But for the people of Kyiv, this isn't academic. This is their lived reality. Their destroyed homes, their injured children, their dead neighbors, their shattered sense of security. As night falls over Kyiv again, families face a terrible question. Do we stay or do we leave? Do we remain in a city that's under constant threat of attacks like last night? Or do we abandon our homes, our communities, our entire lives, and flee to uncertain safety elsewhere? It's a question millions of Ukrainians have already faced. Millions more may face it in the nights and weeks ahead. And there are no easy answers. Stay and risk death. Leave and lose everything that made life worth living. The choice between physical survival and spiritual death. Last night's attack was designed to make that choice impossible, to create such fear and trauma that staying becomes unthinkable, to empty Kyiv of its people and its will to resist, to break the spirit of a nation through the terror of its citizens. But here's what the architects of last night's attack miscalculated. Fear and resolve aren't opposites. You can be terrified and defiant simultaneously. You can acknowledge the danger and refuse to surrender to it. You can mourn the dead while preparing to defend the living. That's what makes this war so different from conventional conflicts of the past. The targets aren't military installations, and the victory conditions aren't territorial control. This is a war of wills, a test of which side can endure more pain, absorb more losses, and continue fighting despite costs that would have ended previous wars decades ago. Last night, Kyiv faced its deadliest attack yet. 300 drones, unprecedented devastation, and this morning the city stood up, assessed the damage, and began rebuilding. Again, that's not just resilience. That's a statement that no amount of drones, no scale of destruction, no level of terror will achieve the surrender that's being demanded. The skies over Kyiv will fill with drones again. More attacks are coming. That's the terrible certainty of this war. But so is the response, the rebuilding, the defiance, the absolute refusal to be broken. That's the real story of last night's attack. Not the drones that got through, but the spirit that didn't break. And that's a lesson worth remembering as this war continues into its fourth year with no end in sight.